All right, so we are here with Blitz Disc Golf. I sent some form clips over to him. He pulled up one of my more recent form-related YouTube videos, and he said that he saw some sequencing issues in my backhand form. And yeah, you guys have been really enjoying this series, and a lot of you upvoted his comment. A lot of you guys kind of requested to see this video. So yeah, if you want to go check out Blitz Disc Golf, he does coaching. He does all kinds of cool stuff. You can check out his YouTube channel. I'll link that in the description below. But let's give Clint the floor.
Yeah. So for some people who don't know, like you and I have been working together for just a little bit now. Especially we started on like some leg stuff, and I'm kind of watching your progress and just kind of seeing you find the pieces and figure out what you think you want to work on and blah blah blah, and then just trying to, along the way give you some tips and factors that maybe you're not thinking about. So the big thing here is I know you're focused on your legs right now, right? I think you're actually moving in the wrong direction.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I think you're actually moving in the wrong direction with your throw as a whole, right? So you putting your focus so far onto the legs is kind of destroying what you had before, and maybe you never had. I haven't really paid attention too much to your form, but the big things, like if we want to talk legs first, right? The first thing is you plant so far ahead of yourself still, right? And a little bit out, but you can see that you kind of have to fall onto your brace. And this is actually like a bigger problem than you think, because you see your whole body kind of cave in to get over there. And then it's like, okay, now I can start coming out of it. The other thing is this kind of dips your pull through. So I think maybe you low release sometimes because you're kind of like collapsing onto your brace and then trying to pull out of it in time. Or I feel like if your front foot was a little closer, you could be starting this knee extension, right? Instead of this frame where you sink into it, right? We want no frame of sinking into it. Basically, as soon as it hits, it's immediately reversing direction. A little late here. But also it's just the number one thing is your legs aren't the problem. That's kind of what I wanted to get at in this call with your sequencing issue. You are focused on lag and leg power, and you shouldn't be. Okay, because you have more brace than you need to hit your goal, to throw as far as you want to throw. Okay, the issue is you are collapsing very badly. Okay, so if we look at you at full reach back, you start yourself like on the wrong foot. Okay, because I think one of the reasons is you're doing this double reach back where you use both hands. You almost kill yourself because this shoulder isn't allowed to actually coil far enough back, right? And what that does is it's starting, so the easiest way to explain it is we want this arm to be 90 degrees, right? So arm to torso, this angle always 90 degrees and never getting outside of 90 degrees. This is the most important thing to understand, right? One, you're weaker, the more obtuse that angle becomes. And two, you're spinning your torso so fast, if you let your arm get behind, you will not get that ground back. Okay. So we call this collapsing, rounding, hugging. Lots of videos on it out there. Basically, you reach back and then your torso turns too fast for your arm to keep up. And you collapse this angle to, less than 90 degrees. Once you do that, now you can never catch up again. So you're always going to be catching up for the rest of the swing. And you can see this in your swing. We will play through this real quick. So here, I think you don't reach back quite 90 degrees enough. Or the other way to look at it is you don't coil that rear shoulder back enough to make this exact reach back be 90 degrees, right? So this is a little more acute of an angle than 90 degrees. And then look, as you kind of drop into your brace, and that's why I said it being kind of far away might be one of the problems. Also, leading with your head is another like little thing that exacerbates the problem because it causes you to turn your torso early. And you can see this angle starts collapsing and collapsing. And now you see we're like in oh shit land.
Yeah,
We want to
when you
be
put it like this, it looks awful.
we want to be at 90 degrees, but we are so collapsed now that your arm will never be strong enough to get you back to 90 degrees in this throw again. Okay. So now what do? You have to move the arm with the torso. And you see they move at the same pace. Right? And you end up in this, even your throw, like your release is not 90 degrees. It is also collapsed. So once you collapse in the beginning, because you've set yourself up in a way that it's going to be hard not to, but then also you've thought about lag, which is hips first, which causes the torso to turn and leaves the arm behind. And this kind of planting a little bit far away from you, all of these factors kind of together, and even this reach back here, kind of collapsing everything in together when you reach back. Okay, so I'd much rather you reach back. Like, first of all, you should just think about coiling this left shoulder back and then just extending this arm to 90. That is your reach back. That's all you have to think about. And then you will not ever have this happen, right? Where you reach back with both hands, and now look at this angle. So we've basically collapsed this angle to where there's just no way for us to ever get back. So there's a bunch of ways to fix this. One of them is don't set yourself up in a position that makes it so much harder for you. But then you have like a few different schools of thought. There's like the horizontal abduction school of thought, where like your goal should be moving this elbow forward during the throw, right? But the bottom line is your arm has to move faster than everything else. It has to. So at no point in your form, right, should your arm be moving the same speed as your torso, right?
Right.
It has to move faster.
It defeats the entire purpose of the throw.
Yeah.
It sounds so obvious, but the application is so difficult.
Yes. But I think this is a trap that a ton of people get caught in, because we're told so much about the legs, so much about hip power, so much about lag, right? Stay loose is another cue that kind of just like, if you stay too loose, like right when you rotate, your arm just gets trapped and you get collapsed. And even if it's not as bad as like a beginner getting trapped behind your rear shoulder, we don't want to be anywhere near here. We have to be here, right? Like 90 degrees and like the box power pocket, it does work, right? There are people who get past that even farther forward than that. Like David Wiggins Jr. is a great example of someone who just gets a ton of horizontal abduction. His arm is moving way faster than his whole body. And this angle becomes extremely acute in the end. Or if you want to think about this pec angle, extremely obtuse. And then you have like people like Christian Cuoxa, who basically keeps 90 the whole throw. Go ahead.
I was going to say, with the David Wiggins Jr. form, I actually, probably like 8 months ago, maybe even, I had a conversation with Disc Golf Spin Doctor that it never got uploaded or anything, but he even told me at one point a way that he thinks about it when he's throwing. I don't know if he didn't necessarily say it's the way he likes to teach it, but when he's throwing, he's actually trying to rip his elbow as hard as he can this way to effectively do the exact same thing that you're doing. So what's your thoughts on I was going to mention that. And then the other thing that I had in my pocket that I wanted to mention was, like, as far as falling onto the brace, I've actually learned, I took a lesson with a coach who almost encouraged me to fall onto the brace. So I almost have like downward momentum going into my plant I'm, instead of like stepping in a flat plane, actually having this leg almost drive into the ground to have like make it easier to plant harder. So you would say that like falling into it's a bad thing essentially?
So that's a good point, and there's a distinction there, right? So like what you're talking about is something like a Seabass step down drill, right? Where you're basically like, he has you do throws on stairs, so you step down into the brace, right? And what that does is it allows your leg to be straighter when it hits the ground, right? If you look at someone like Anthony Barella when he throws 360s, his leg is like perfectly straight when it hits the ground, right? Because it has to be to stop all that momentum. So that's different though than like having to step forward and like move onto your brace, right? Where I want you to be is in a position with your plant foot where you can shift balance without having to move your entire body like forward or forward and down in this case, because you're stepping onto a bent knee and then having to move forward onto that bent knee. Yeah, it does look like you're going down into your brace, but it's not the right kind of down, right? If we were coiling up in our hip and then kind of going into our brace like this, but in a balanced, like centered position with our body, that would be like the correct stepping down into your brace and like using that vertical momentum to create more bracing force. But what you're doing is more stepping forward onto a bent leg, which I think is just it's a little less good for power. But once again, you don't even have to worry about your brace because we're so collapsed, we can't use all that power anyways. And you have legitimately 50 feet in just your upper body right now at this point if you never touch your legs for the next month.
Yeah. And then, so as far as like that downward position with the leg, I do feel like this is something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. So you think it's, as long as it is initiated at the hip and at the leg, it's okay. But if it's your whole body, then it's probably bad. Like your whole body moving down into it. Is that kind of what you're saying? Like you should almost be like reaching with your leg and not so much letting your whole body move in that way. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah. So there shouldn't be too much like back to front when you're shifting your weight. Like there's going to be a little, and that's like the butt wipe drill. You're like move your ass toward the target. But you really just don't want to be like stepping out. Let me get up and demonstrate this, I guess.
Yeah, that would be
You really
great.
just don't want to be, you don't want to be like stepping forward here where my weight is on my back leg, and the only way for me to get to my front leg is to move my entire body,
Yeah.
right, and then extend. Right, I would much rather be in a more centered position. So Seabass talks about this a lot as well. Like Eagle McMahon does this great. When he X steps, right, when he goes to his left foot, he's leaning forward. His center of mass is ahead of his X leg, so that when his brace hits, he's centered already, and he just has to extend. He
Right.
doesn't have to move forward after the brace hits, right?
Okay.
The other thing is it's just going to help you keep a straighter leg. Like I know you've been working on straightening your leg, your brace leg, and it looks good, in my opinion, the straightening work that you've been doing. But you're making it a little harder on yourself because you're having to move far and then immediately try to straighten instead of just planting in a place where you are in between your 2 points of contact and you can switch your balance between them with little, right, shifting.
Yeah, and part of the my reason why I want to straighten it, and maybe people can relate to this as well. I get like I think it's from the bent leg, like really bad patella tendonitis in my right knee, and I found that when my leg's straight, I no longer have that problem, and I'm finding my ever since I did that, I'll after a bunch of throwing, my glutes will be sore the next day, which I feel like I'm now loading my like muscles instead of my tendons. And just so
Yeah.
not so much necessarily even from a performance standpoint, but just like injury prevention standpoint. That's why that's become like an obsession of mine because nothing depresses me more than being injured. And for me and my body, it feels like a straight leg is less likely to hurt me.
Yeah, and you're totally right. You're going to see less forces. You know, if you're closer to max extension, you're just your quad stronger, right?
Yeah.
So I think you're on the right track with the leg, like getting it straighter, especially for injury prevention. But yeah, I think your number one issue, and we can look at some other videos too, and we can see if you're doing it in the other videos. But your number one issue is just you are collapsing. You are hugging yourself.
And I know you're saying you're saying it's my arm, and I keep talking about my legs, and I understand that I
Yeah.
keep pulling you away from it, and that's probably annoying. But I just wanted to
No, you're good.
there's something that people care about, and I want to make sure that I'm explaining my perspectives just enough to where people understand that I'm not just pushing back and being combative. I just want to make sure that it's understood of why exactly I'm doing what I'm doing. I think the thought process, people probably think the same things. They don't know if what they're doing is right or wrong. So I just wanted to touch on
Hmm.
that. I would like to look at some of the other clips I sent you and see if it's the same thing because the video that you're pulling up now and my throws from the last 2 days look completely different in a lot of different ways, in my
Let me
opinion.
reshare.
But I'm super curious to see if they look different in your opinion.
Yep, let me reshare.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see if we can sort this by.
And I was at while you pull that up, I was at Hornet's Nest yesterday doing a disc review for a new disc that had come out, and it's like I'm starting to develop comfort on that straight leg, and I feel like it's kind of helping my other stuff feel more balanced. and I
Yeah.
threw some really nice like distance PRs with the same sort of concept. So I'm curious to see like the video we reviewed is from like 3 or 4 days ago, and then the throws from like 1 and 2 days ago I feel like look different. So I'm super curious to
Mhm.
see if you think have some of these things gotten better from working on a lot of the stuff, or am I still making the same issue?
Yeah. So first, to talk about the legs just a little bit, this is kind of the reason I came out with the piston drill, is to show people how to keep their weight centered and basically switch the vertical pistons without having to move, your whole center between the legs. And I don't mind you at all bringing me back to the legs because one, you and I have talked a bunch, and I know you're very receptive to feedback, so I don't feel like you're pushing back against me at all. And I know you want me to explain it so that people watching who are having those same kind of problems kind of get what's going on. The big thing I would say is if you have upper body problems, right, in your throw, they are almost always like there are some very rare cases or like very beginner people who like are just planting like, you know, and you're like, okay, we have to fix that first.
Yeah.
But in general, if you have like a even moderately good brace, you almost always will get more power from the upper body. Like I think Eunice Marilis, the Finnish head coach,
Hmm.
he's got some studies and he's been conducting a bunch of testing with Kuoksa on like how much comes from the upper body and how much power comes from the lower body. I think people are going to be like crazy surprised when they see like how much power your upper body, like above your hips, is responsible for in the disc golf throw. And like if you see these people who are able to throw from their knees, from a terrible lie, like Eagle McMahon's famous forehand over the railing, right? Like these people have crazy torso power and arm timing, okay? Forehand and backhand, that is the majority of power that you will get in the disc golf backhand and forehand. So it's like people are so focused on their legs, and a lot of times they need to build like their upper body timing and like elbow orientation, protraction, right? That's one way you can stave off kind of this collapsing thing is protracting a bit more to get your elbow away from you. Um, like I played with Carter Aarons once, and he asked me like, "What is the number one most important tip you'd give to someone like to add distance to their game?" And I genuinely think it is like get your elbow away from you. Just this amount of space here, you have to have a gap between your elbow and your body, and you should be able to see it. Like if you look at videos of Zach Nash, who in my opinion is one of the best throwers on tour, you can see a gap, air between him, like his arm and his chest at all times, right? And if you look at his reach back, it almost looks wide rail, but it's really not. He's just coiling. He's coiling and reaching out like maybe exactly 90 degrees, but he coils so much it's like almost behind him when he actually turns around because he gets such a ridiculous coil. But that the only thing that really matters, right, is you coil as much as your body is capable of. Really thinking about getting this back shoulders to the target is good. And then you just reach that arm out to 90, and that is like your reach back position for everyone. And then the only goal you have is maintain 90 degrees or more acute in this angle, right? And the acute part only comes after the pocket. So 90 degrees all the way to the pocket, and then you're allowed, right, to go forward.
Right.
That's kind of the best way to think of it.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you say that, and it's a lot of that leg stuff comes from my fear of getting injured, and that's where that comes from. But I totally like when you say it's in the arm, I totally understand that, and I have the arm power. I can throw a standstill 350 foot, 400 foot forehand. People have seen me do it time and time again, and I get
Mhm.
compliments every time I play a tournament on how my forehand power is standstill with a walk up. It's smooth, it goes far, and it's so I know the power's there, and it's like what it's like I get so frustrated. I'm like, if I can throw a 350 foot standstill forehand, I should be able to throw a 500 foot or 450 foot backhand with an X step. Like my arm's capable of it, and it's like I can totally see how important the arm is, and it's like getting the arm to do what it needs to do is so tricky, especially from someone like I have an athletic background and I'm pretty in shape, I think, and I'm good at sports, and it's like I almost feel like I'm like bound inside of my habits, and it's like limiting me so much. It's so frustrating.
So I get what you're saying, and I would have to look at some of your like past form from like 6 months ago, a year ago, before you started working on this stuff, to see like if this has just been an inherent problem. Like I already like this a little more because remember when I was talking about this rear arm kind of coming together with the front arm is kind of going to almost, it will protract you, but it'll also make it really easy to collapse this angle on the turn. And I see here you're doing a little less. So you're getting a little bit more, and you see this
I
elbow
can
even kind of
wait.
goes back.
I gotta watch your stream here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
go for it.
Yeah, I'm here.
All right. So you can see the difference in this off arm between this one and the last one is they're not reaching out in front of you together, right? This one, your rear arm is kind of more allowing you to coil. So it's opening this back shoulder more, which is making this reach back closer to 90 degrees, right? So my hypothesis on this throw before even watching it is you're going to collapse a little less because you're starting yourself in a more beneficial position. It is a little less. And
And
you can see, go ahead.
yeah, and you know what's funny about this and what helped me get in that position? I put my camera in a spot where I could almost potentially like put my eyes towards the camera, like almost just allowing myself to turn my whole body back uncomfortably far for me. I don't
Hmm.
know. That was just something that I was like, maybe if I just kind of like have a little gander at the camera before I throw, it'll maybe put me in a little better position. I don't know if that's a thing or not a thing, but I feel like I was turning my whole body in a better direction on these throws.
It looks like you were immediately from the first like couple frames. And like stuff like that works for sure. Like your head movement and your eyes control a lot. Like if I see someone collapsing, in squats or deadlift, right? I tell them to like bring their gaze up a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's going to stop like back flexion because your body doesn't like to be looking up while rounded over, or the opposite, like in extension looking down. Like it's
Right,
really uncomfortable.
right.
So using your eyes to train this kind of stuff is great.
You know, it's
Let's
one
see.
one thing that's funny about me that's super unrelated and probably not helpful at all is I'm like blind in my right eye. I have like an optic nerve thing, so you would never tell by looking at me, but my right eye's like completely blind, and I think a lot of my head
Wow.
position stuff comes from that, and it's I actually throw with my eyes closed when I throw backhand, and I don't know why, but I literally look like just like a fat baby throwing because my eyes are like slammed shut every time I throw a backhand. So I'm like lacing lines with like completely closed eyes like 99% of the time. It's so weird. And I can't open my eyes when I throw. I don't know what it is. But it's like even if I did open my eyes, I wouldn't be able to see unless I turned my whole head to look with my left eye anyway.
Yeah, actually, Goose and Ezra Aderhold were talking about this yesterday in their playthrough, where Goose was talking about looking backwards. It makes you trust your line, makes you trust your setup and foot position to hit your line and not be looking kind of to where the shot's going to go. So I don't think it's a bad thing to not look at the line you're throwing on at all.
Okay, well that's good to know. But that's like a little overshare, I suppose, but something
I
kind of
like
unique
the
to me.
face though; it does look funny.
I know, like, dude, I look so stupid when I throw because my eyes are like completely shut.
So don't hate this bit moving onto your brace again, right? So I want to see if possible, right, as soon as his heel gets down, as little flexion frames as possible and as soon as an extension as you can get, right? That front piston should be firing as soon as possible. If you see sinking down before, you probably got a little bit more work to do. But you see you get a much better extension in the end here. You're getting on the outside of your foot with that like straightening that you were talking about.
See, and
I would say, go
go
ahead.
on. No, no, you go. Sorry, I'm cutting you off.
So I would say I see a little bit of you need more a little more rigidity in your torso. So you can see here it kind of is getting bent over your front hip. It's like bowing.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you I have a drill called the rear shoulder shall not pass that teaches how to basically be rigid. So keep your abs on so that your torso, when you get the bracing force, can like withstand it instead of basically bracing and everything kind of just collapses forward over the brace.
Now, as far as the core flexion goes, I have seen your drill, and I went and practiced it after I'd watched it. But as far as like the core position, do you feel like you should be like um what is it, anterior pelvic tilting your to actually crunch your abs almost like you're in doing a sit up position, or should you be like upright and let like almost like you're in a plank position? I guess. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like you see Anthony Barella run up and is like hunched over like a caveman. Is that's good, right?
So yeah, so I think optimal the optimal kind of position is slight flexion and slight protraction. And I'm sure there'll be some arguments about that. Like I know Seabass is neutral spine and neutral shoulder. But what I find for people who are, below the 550 mark is if you add a little bit of flexion and a little bit of protraction, you give them a bunch more room, and usually they see gains pretty immediately. So that's kind of where I'm at until you hit that mark where like you're allowed to break the rules, right? Usually giving yourself more space is almost always going to result in a better throw. And I myself think about a little bit of protraction and a little bit of flexion when I can,
And
and try to
protraction
keep it in my form.
protraction being this, and then flexion being with your core a bit.
So flexion, yeah, is hollowing out your body. If you know what a hollow hole,
Mm-hmm.
so basically
Mm-hmm.
nips down, and then extension is the opposite, nips up, and then protraction is shoulder out, so forward, kind of like if you were a waiter and you were offering someone a towel, you'd put your shoulder out forward like this, and you'll see just how much space this gives me, right? It gives me so much space that even if I'm doing what you're doing, like reaching back a little less than ideal, if I give myself a shitload of extra space and I reach back less than ideal, I don't get caught because I'm just giving myself another 4 inches of space that I can use for my
Right.
disc. So,
Right.
and the same thing with flexion, it just gives you a little more. I have a video. Sorry, I keep talking about all these videos, but I focus on all this stuff. Um, One called "Get the Disc Inside of You," which is kind of a memey name, but it basically goes over like how to hold it like you're holding a basketball that you don't want anyone to get away from you, right? So you just got a rebound and people are fighting for the ball and you're here, right? You're rounded over a little bit, you're protracted over a little bit, you got all this space so you can get everything tight into you. It's kind of how I like to feel in the disc golf throw, right? To give myself as much space as possible. I think posture is really important, and it can save you from a lot of these like things going wrong and stealing your power.
And it's like all these things you're saying, it's all oriented in getting your arm where it needs to be. Like more space is always more better. It seems like until you've gone out of control with it
Yeah,
in
and
your philosophy at least.
to to be honest, it's almost hard to get out of control with it. Like if it feels like to bring up Zach Nash, he throws so hard. Like he like upper 70s. Like he has the tech disc record at like 1850 RPM. Okay, like absurd. Okay, and if you look at his form, he is giving himself basically the maximal amount of space at every frame. Right, he's not as focused as keeping the disc like crazy close to him as he is just getting leverage by just getting everything away from him. So he has this huge lever, right, to come in and out. And then he just, boom. It feels like getting your elbow farther away from you, which all of these cues pretty much accomplish that, just gives you more leverage and allows you to use the power that you do have a little bit more efficiently. That's what I would say. So I would even say it's hard to do it too much. It's hard to get it too much away from you. I would say if you are kind of a beginner or an AM, don't force full on max protraction just because you don't know if your shoulder's ready for that. I don't want anyone to injure themselves. So start with a nice, comfortable, relaxed protraction.
And I do now. That's good that you say that because I'm such a like a I have such an injury avoidance and risk averse mindset. When I do protract and throw really hard, it's okay at first. But when I hit my pitch count, like I've been throwing this freaking Delirium, which is a 14 and a half speed, and I'm like, I gotta
Mm-hmm.
freaking hammer this thing for it to go. And I'm doing my best to protract, and when I rip that as hard as I can, like towards the end of the round, it's okay at first, but when I hit my pitch count, I'm like, ooh, I don't know, my shoulder necessarily like that one. So
Yeah.
I think you can't just like as I'm working on this stuff, I have way overthrown. Like I wrecked my index finger. my joint is like swollen, my finger was bleeding, a lot of the stuff is healed up, but like this process of getting better and like overthrowing is something you really what like how do you feel like managing pitch count is managed for a lot of people?
So it's actually, I think it's a great thing to bring up because if you talk to any person who throws like 70 plus miles per hour, right? If you talk to them and ask them, was there a phase where they had blisters on their fingers and their fingers were bleeding and they had to rest a lot more? There always is. Like when you're putting new forces on your body that it's never seen before, right? It is going to react. It is going to have some like, oh crap, I need to build thicker skin. I need to build thicker tendons. I need to do all these things to be able to handle these forces. So you really have to make sure that like when you're climbing the ladder of speed, right, you don't just say, "Oh, I just gained 2 miles an hour. Let's gain another two tomorrow. Let's gain another two the next day. Let's gain another two the next day." Because you're not giving your body time to ramp up and adapt, right? So I would say definitely like when you see speed gains, one, iron them in. So keep working on the thing you were working on that gave you them to make sure that it becomes a core part of your form, but also so that you have some time to adapt to that newfound speed before you go to the next thing that might also add some speed, right? So don't just swap around as you see speed gains. Like, okay, I fixed this, now fix the next thing. You do have to give a little bit of time, and it's not that much, right? If when you think about it in the grand scheme of things, if you change one thing a month, in 1 year, right, of playing disc golf, you will be a cranker. Because if you're gaining 2 miles an hour exchange, you just gain 20 miles an hour in a year, you know? So it's like
Yeah.
people rush a little too much usually, and that's when I tend to see injuries.
Yeah, and I thankfully my body holds up pretty good because I exercise and I take good care of myself. But I know a lot of people in disc golf, that's not exactly the case. I see a lot of disc golfers that is their primary source of exercise, and I think when you're working on this stuff, like you don't necessarily need to warm up to go play around, but if you're gonna you need to warm up before you go do your speed work. I feel like I'm getting the resistance band out, I'm doing pull aparts, I'm doing like
Yep.
I'm like pulling my shoulder back and doing rows, and I'm doing like hip to shoulder separation. Like I'm doing all kinds of stuff before I even throw a couple shots. I'm even gonna get those bands for my fingers because my fingers are like getting like trashed. Like I got all kinds of stuff I got to warm up before I throw these days.
Yeah. Yeah. As you get faster, you will. Like Nick Crush has a full on, like hour-long warm-up routine, okay, before he goes and throws 80 something miles an hour, right?
Yep.
He has to because, the forces are huge. They really are. Like he has some physics examples too of how disc golf throw compares to baseball forces, and it's closer than you would think. And some people in disc golf are seeing the same forces as like professional, like major league baseball pitchers. So it's like you do have to warm up, and I totally agree. Like more beginners should warm up, and it helps you also use the muscles that you're supposed to be using. Like make sure you warm up your glutes. You want to be using your glutes a lot in the throw. So if you're not warming them up, maybe your body's not using them because they're cold and they're not ready. Um, so that's definitely, especially when you're working on some leg stuff, make sure that all those muscles are ready to fire when you try to, make them fire. It's super important, I think.
Now let's reel it back in because I did send you one more clip that I would like to see you go over.
Okay.
I think all this stuff
You
is
want me to go over this
important.
one or just go to the third one?
I think we could go over both, but the
Okay.
recent one is my most recent form. It's not a full power shot per se, but
Okay.
there was a lot of when I look at that throw, I feel like there's things that look good. Hopefully you can see enough of my body to be able to analyze it. You can't see everything, but I feel like a lot of things could potentially be better with this throw. Like or they're better than they were. I can still see the reach back's too high. My front leg's slightly bent, but it felt good, you know? I can still see my shoulders are freaking moving together. Now that you pointed out, it's like it's staring at me in the face, and
You like, I think this one's good. Then he goes, look.
it's like, oh,
Okay.
it's worse than before. No,
So yeah, you see the problem, right? You know what we're looking for now.
and
Um,
that's what's so critical about this because I thought this looked good, but now that we've talked about it, I can see it's awful.
So there's two main things I would talk to you about here that you need to get, in my opinion, working on quickly. Is the first one is this hip. I want to see it up and back more. I want to see you coiling on one axis, right? Instead of you pushing forward onto this leg, I want to see you, let me see if I can get my feet in the frame here. I want to see you coil like this, up and back, right? And then plant where you're allowed to because of how you've coiled. And then when the thing hits, you don't have to move onto it, right? You're in the center and you're pushing up and back to coil yourself and then just stepping where that puts you. Kind of like the same thing as our reach back, right? We just coil and then we extend. Our plant foot's kind of the same, right? We coil into this rear hip, we extend our leg, and that's where our plan is, right? We're not coiling and then saying, here, nope, I'm going to go a little farther, right? We're just putting it down where it makes sense to put it down. That's the first thing, because you can see your rear hip really isn't getting pushed back, and like I should see a little bit of this knee going backwards to push this hip up, right?
Say that again. Where you got your mouse there? Yeah, let me see what you're saying here.
Yeah, let me see if I can get my pen tool out here. I'll draw a line for you. All right, so I should see this knee moving backwards a little bit, okay? To start, which will move this hip.
Straighten the back leg more.
Yes. To start, like in this, you're not planted yet, right? So this is a good frame to be doing that. And then basically you're gonna push this up and back to get this back hip coiled, and that's gonna bring this front hip down a little bit. And this knee is gonna face a little bit more toward the camera. Okay. And then here's when you would start letting it drop forward to get ready. And you see you do let it drop forward at a pretty good frame here. See how it starts turning inward?
Yeah, so
that's good.
Not terrible.
But I want to see this part better before that. Okay. So it's kind of like coil it, then drop it in, not just like drag it, then drop it.
Yeah, it's not even really coiling properly.
And that's just it's pushing you forward, right? I'll get rid of this stuff for you. But this is kind of one of the issues that you're having is you're headed in this direction with your whole body, where I just want you to be basically centered, and you're pushing up to coil things on this one axis. So up with the back hip and down with the front hip. Then when the front foot lands, we just reverse, right? And we get this same like circular pattern instead of, right, X step foot, drift forward, not really much coil, and then bam, we land. Now we're like, okay, we're having to just like press out of it in like an awkward fashion, I think. Yeah, so you see you land and your upper body, your torso is still like leaned forward, and now you're just like, all right, it's a one leg, like go.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing. And then obviously you see this problem with the angle. I really think this is the number one thing you need to focus on. Just do not let this arm get outside 90 ever, the whole throw. In the reach back, that's all I want you to be thinking about is don't reach inside of 90 degrees ever, okay?
So when I go to throw, instead of even thinking of reaching back, literally just put my arm straight out in front of me.
Yep. And you'll feel that you have...
can happen, basically.
Yes, and then there's a bunch of ways to get the elbow forward, like I was talking about with like David Wiggins Jr. versus Quoke. So I'm of the opinion that horizontal abduction, moving the elbow forward is the best way. Okay, so actually reaching back to 90 and then pulling forward, right, to get your arm ahead of the body to make the arm move faster than the torso. Okay. But you can also do like the Quokes kind of thing, and I'm sure he horizontally abducts as well, but he doesn't really get as far forward as someone like Wiggins, where basically your goal is just to keep it 90 the whole throw. Okay, that would also work completely fine. You can throw very, very far like that. The only thing that doesn't work is collapsing it, right? And then you can collapse it and pull out of it a little bit, like Paul Macbeth used to do that in his old form, but it is not, in my opinion, is not the best. It is much harder on your body, much more prone to injury, because you're really having to pull from a compromised position to get back to a good position.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess the back hip coiling. So the most important thing is the upper body is getting that elbow. So that's I can only work on like one thing at a time.
Yep,
And I feel like if I had to do one thing, you think that would be it.
100%.
Okay.
It's not even close. Like it's not even close. I don't care if your legs were set up like this and you were reaching back correctly and not collapsing, you would legitimately throw 40 feet further,
Yeah.
like in a week or two. And you might get elbow pain because you've never thrown that hard before in your life, but you'd have to ramp up to it and make sure your grip is used to it. Like the most common injury in disc golf is like synovitis in usually the middle finger, which is swelling of the joint. So make sure you're taking care of your fingers. Make sure you're keeping your pitch count when you're moving up in speed, because finger injuries suck and they take so long to recover from sometimes. It could just be like a chronic inflammation thing. So that's
Yeah, for
kind of
me,
my
it's my
warning.
index finger. I've never felt my middle finger in my life, so maybe there's something wrong with my grip, but I only feel this finger.
So yeah, I find the skin on my index finger is the first to go, but actually synovitis wise, like joint wise, I find my middle is the
No.
most affected.
My
And I
middle
know I think
finger's fresh. My index finger joint is like ready to explode.
okay,
So that's
huh?
probably
Well,
bad. I
maybe we'll
don't
have to look at that next time.
know. Well, do you have anything else that you want to go over for today? I know you had some other lessons and things aligned for today.
Yeah, I'm down to do this again whenever, or me and you can do it privately. I'm kind of invested in your journey, and I want to see you, become an absolute bomber. So let me know if you need anything. I hope the people enjoy this video, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, it was good. Make sure you go check out Clint's socials. I'll put his channel in the description down below. A lot of the stuff that he talks about, he has drills specifically designed to do, but sometimes the drills just aren't enough. I have so many years of bad habits that just going and doing the piston drill for a few days, it just doesn't seem to get it done for me. Maybe I'm just not as intuitive as I need to be. Whatever the case is, if you do the drills and it doesn't work, you probably should find a way to work with a coach directly. That's what's been helping me, I feel like. And it's just, I'm stubborn and I need constant reminders, which is the unfortunate reality. I can't just go and get it perfect right away. So, but I'm putting in the work. I think I've been throwing a lot and I'm trying,
Yeah,
but it's just
he's been sending me videos like every day or every other day. Like I think I fixed this, I think I fixed that. So he's kind of really on board this process. Like it's not just putting on a show for the channel. He's kind of putting in the work. One thing I wanted to say about coaching is I think a lot of people get caught in watching YouTube videos that weren't made for them, right? So the most important thing to your form is the cues you need to fix the issues that you have, right? So you can't just watch videos and be like, okay, I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that. Because what you're doing is you're working on something that might be the exact opposite direction that you personally need to go based on what you're doing. So be careful kind of when you're watching YouTube videos. And if you kind of feel like you're sitting in one spot or even moving backwards, get with a coach. They're going to be able to give you the drills that are applicable to you, not just drills in general. And that's going to make such a huge difference in your progress.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I do too because I love trying new things. I love changing my grip. I love changing my everything. I'll see a video and if Tristan Tanner says, "Hey, you should try and do this," or someone says you should try and do that, or Joel Freeman says this or whatever, and it's like sometimes it's bad advice or sometimes it's good advice, but it's good advice that's not designed for me. I'll go and I'll try it and I'll be like, well, this guy's pretty good and he said to do this, so maybe I'll just go give it a try. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but like you should probably consult a coach when you do make these changes. And there's so many great coaches like Clint, Nick Crush. There's so many like super qualified people that are diving into the science of this stuff. And even it's okay to go try stuff, but you still want someone who's going to point you in the right direction. I feel like that's where Clint's been super helpful for me because it's like I think I'm making progress, and in some ways I am, but I had things right, and I've actually digressed in some ways. I feel like so I need to just keep touching base with him to make sure that things aren't digressing to a point where it's like I'm getting worse.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to work on something and then pull it back and fix the thing that broke while you worked on it. And then you can kind of go back and forth. So it's important to always be working on like the lowest hanging fruit because that's what's going to make you see like gains.
And for me, the lowest hanging fruit is the 90-degree arm and getting the elbow out in front. So that's what I'm going to focus on for probably the next week. I'm trying to try not to think about anything else. I've been doing too much thinking, and I just need to do one thing at a time now. Having too much
There you
fun.
go. Let me think for you.
All right, I'll see you. Have a good one.
All right, you too.
Yeah.